Welcome to another powerful episode of Pulse of Polynesia, where we dive deep into culture challenges and truth about as Pacific people. I'm Leaso Filoyali'i coming to you live from Katy, Texas. And joining me all the way up north in Oklahoma is my co-host, Chief Tassi. He's currently dealing with some technical difficulties, but he'll eventually jump on soon. Tonight, we welcome an incredible Superman. His story is one of strength, soul, and sacred purpose. There's so much to unpack, but instead of listing all the accolades, we're letting him walk us through the journey. In the hot seat tonight, a devoted father, husband to a beautiful Samoan queen, founder of the Afatasi brand, a former college basketball coach, and so much more. Uchenna Faumuina-Eze. Welcome, welcome. What's up, what's up, what's up?
Talo Falava, how are you doing?
Good, good, good. Thank you. It's been so long. Oh my gosh. And I take it you just had a long day today. How was your day though?
Today was very good and very impactful. Finished up a Juneteenth celebration in Seaside, California, and this is my fourth time attending it. And just watching the community come together, not just for the celebration, but for the cause. And they had some amazing entertainers. They had LaRussell
Yeah.
and Mr. Fab, and just watching them interact and um, get involved with the youth with the messages was very great. So, I was kind of, exhausted in a sense, but renewed, in purpose. So I'm feeling good.
Yeah, well, that's really good to hear. Also, you mentioned LaRuss.
The
I'm
Russell.
very, oh, yes,
Hmm.
I think you mentioned earlier, he's a hip hop artist, right?
He's a hip hop artist. He's from the Bay, and he's doing his
Yeah.
thing. He did so many songs, but one of the things that I really loved about him is the fact that he's very present with his audience, and he just
Okay.
had an amazing show and put on. It was his first time in Seaside, California, and I think it won't be his last either. So it was great watching him. Shout out to LaRussell
Yeah, nice. Well, that's good to know that you were
and
able
Mr. Fab.
to. Yay! Well, it's nice to know that you were out there in the community to help out. So there's so much to hear, and we'll save that for later because we want to dive into the community service that you've already done and dealing with all the people in the Bay Area, California's as a whole. But
Hmm.
let's take us back, Uchina. Tell us about young Uchina. What were you like as a child growing up with your twin?
Oh man, if my mother was alive, man, she would probably
Oh,
just say so many words, but I think she would probably say most of all, just being proud. I was one of those kids who um, I grew up in a different household, not the typical household like um, you would see in normal American lives. I grew up in
yeah.
a blended household. I had my mother, um, my stepfather, and then I had my identical twin, and then I had half brothers and sisters in the same home as me. My parents were military, so it was uh, that was extraordinary within itself. Traveling the world every 3 months, we had a new duty. I mean, excuse me, 3 years, sometimes two. We had new duty stations to PCS two, and always changing environments. But my childhood was very unique. I started off with living with my grandmother, who
Okay.
my earliest experiences um, of knowing love and caring and community and family was that's the kind of household I grew up in. And my grandmother was not only had my mother's kids, but she had other family members as well in this, I want to say, a bedroom home, um, in the corner. And she was it was a single woman by herself doing this, and just an extraordinary childhood, learning how to do things on my own or within the community, like the Salvation Army or stuff like that. But very unique childhood, just filled with love, laughter, and really joy in God, most importantly.
That's amazing, Uchina. Especially it's fun when you have a bunch of your cousins around as siblings and your the rest of your family. And so you said you mentioned 8 bedroom home. That's a big house.
It was very big. Now they converted some rooms. We know how our families do, we do it,
Yeah.
but they converted some rooms. I know we had this great living room that my grandmother turned into a great master bedroom, and it was sliding
Wow.
doors. It was and it was a corner lot. Um, not to be funny, but we literally had the whole corner of the street, and then the dental clinic or the dental office on the corner took this little bitty space up, and but it never, and they helped us, as helped our family as well. But yeah, it was a big home. I had aunts, uncles there. Behind us was the Coliseum, and so,
Wow.
I had an interesting childhood, but none to say the least. But yeah, very, very, very cool house too.
I mentioned before I even said it to everyone else who's listening that you're a twin,
Hmm.
and being a twin, was it difficult for your teachers to distinguish the both of you because you're an identical twin?
Yes, it was. I got blamed for some stuff that I shouldn't have got blamed for as a kid. But I also, it was kind of unique because, I was explaining one time to you all earlier the comparison that you hear, the impact you have on someone's life, right? Um, yes, we're two different people, but what we carry and what the expression of love and life, it's through us both. And so when you hear people that have, ran across my twin and have came back to me, they're like, yo, you guys are so, so much alike, but yet so different. And, you're doing so much of the same work. And so I love having that. But, as a kid, it was unique because my mother always had us in those identical outfits, and we would just have our socks would be different, or, it'd be, so she knew how to tell us apart. But yeah, for people, that didn't know us or didn't know that I was a twin, it was very rough because I faced some childhood things, that I was exposed to earlier, and, mistaken identity, or, they blame my brother for something, and my mother had to get involved, and then she's like, do you know they're twins? And then they're like, oh, we didn't know that, and smirk comes on my brother's face, and like, gotcha, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, it's been very unique, seeing it. I tell you, one of the things that me and my brother have been longing to do is to go to Twinsburg to do the Twins Festival.
Oh,
We
okay.
didn't get a chance to do that as kids. And so me and my brother are planning to do that.
Well, that's pretty good.
Hmm.
Oh, by the way, welcome, Arlington. Um, I'm glad to see you back on. He had a hard time trying to get on. So-
Sorry, yeah, all kinds of tech issues. I'm not going to blame Apple products, but yeah, that's all I have. It just seems like the phone went down, laptop went down. But yeah, welcome on board, brother. So good to hear your intro there.
Thank you. Malo soy full Arlington.
Alalaba, se fue manguia.
Why my way?
Manguia fafkai.
Good, good.
Share a little bit more about that twin event that where's that at?
So it's in Twinsburg, Idaho, if I believe.
Okay.
And it is, um, Twinsburg is a unique place because a lot of twins live there, and they do this event where multiple sets of people come in, as far as births, right? Twins, triplets, you name it. And it's a day for you to come there. People are dressed alike and really celebrate the uniqueness, right, of being a twin.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, or multiple sets. So we can't just say the twins, but yes.
It kind of reminds me of the Doublemint bubble gum. Do you remember that commercial?
I do. I do. Oh, trust me, being a twin, I had all kind of nicknames growing up. We were the Whisper Twins. That was a old group, like an R&B group. We were, the Crimson Twins from GI Joe,
Oh
freaking Frack.
gosh.
We had all kind of nicknames growing up. But yeah. Definitely remember that Double Mint commercial.
I meant to
So
ask you last night.
go ahead.
You know, they say about twins, they have these extra sensory, they can sense each other, whether it's pain or emotions, regardless of how far you are. Have you guys had any of that? I wouldn't say, what's the word that they say? It's not paranormal. I can't figure out the name. But, you know, it's like a unique, it's like a
Like
gift that you guys have, right? Like
like
that.
a telepathy.
Yes, right.
Like you could, yes, yes, we do have that. It's like a paranormal kind of feeling, if you will. How do you, there are many times where I've called my brother and, I've said, hey man, are you, my leg is hurting. Are you okay? Or, you know, um,
Can
I
he
share,
feel it?
he can feel it, and he'll tell me, what's going on. But, um, yeah, we've had many situations, but I think one time I had a scare, like a health scare.
Hmm.
And, as I was sitting there, I wasn't like afraid of what's to come, right? I wasn't afraid of that. I was more worried about my brother and my sisters and my family, right? And the feeling that overcame me felt like a broken heart. And so I immediately called my brother and I was like, hey, is everything okay? And I didn't really go into details with him, but you know, uh, and he had told me he felt like something was wrong. And so yeah, I've been there. And as twins, it's I think it's a special gift that we have, right? That I'm thankful for because it keeps me balanced too. Although he's, like I said earlier, he's doing the work and I'm doing the work. When that pain or something feels off, I can feel it, and it throws my day out of alignment too. You know.
Yeah, no, it reminds me of what was the show that used to come on in the 80s, 90s? I think it was Unsolved Mysteries. There's a lot
Oh
of,
yeah.
yeah, they would share a lot about that. So it's always interesting to see those stories of, regardless of how distant they were,
Oh
someone
yeah.
always sensed what was going on. So they can feel that strong emotion, and it allowed them to call them to say, hey, hey, mom,
Hmm.
something's wrong with so and so, and then mom will say, well, how do you know? It's just, I know, we have that feeling. It's that bond that they have. Yeah, it's great to hear that you
Oh
guys share
yeah.
that.
Yeah. And twins is never ending competition, right? Multiple sets. One of the things that I've been blessed with just in my journey in life is I've always came up, and me and my twin on two opposite coasts, right? And so um, one of the coolest things for me, especially when we were in the same state, I always had an opportunity to work around multi-sets, not just twins, but triplets, in my field that I'm in, and multiple. And some of the times I'm with my brother, some of the times I'm not, but twins can sense twins. I'm talking, I can from older to the younger
Hmm.
ones that are in, like, that are literally babies. In fact, I met a couple in the mall one day that a guy that I had knew from playing basketball with, and he had twin babies. And I went over and didn't tell him I was a twin yet, but just interacted with the twins, and they can sense that. We can sense some things, and it's very unique for us. But yeah, wouldn't trade it for the world.
We have a comment on here. I'm gonna read it real quick, Arlington. Um, it must have been difficult because people couldn't tell the difference between the two of you. And
Oh yeah, very difficult. I've had my share of run-ins being a twin, right? Uh, Younger, you get defensive, right? Your fists are cuffed. You're ready to. You don't know what's going to happen. Somebody runs up on you and say, "Hey," and I'm like, "Hey, twin." So a lot of people know me in this world, in this lifetime, know me. Obviously Uchenna, but twin, and so it's very unique because big up to a lot of my brothers in the music industry and, family, especially, like Jay Bug and Common Kings, but they'll run across my twin on the East Coast and, it's always love. We're family, but they're always just like, man, y'all always get me. I'm thinking you're him and he's you. And, and so but it's always great when we're together so they can see that interaction and know why, we're filled with love and joy and we share that with the world. But, it's got its ups and downs. But it's, more ups than downs.
Well, I have an interesting question for you. Again, it's from Janet, and she
Hmm.
says, have you two ever switched places and lived each other's lives?"
Can I plead the fifth on that? No, we switched places before.
Mm.
I might have to start like a private chat for the ins and outs of that. But yes, we switched places before, and it's way unique. Now, as we get older, hopefully, I don't think people can really tell us apart now more than ever. But uh, but switching those places, especially back then, I was a little nervous. Especially when we're doing like classroom stuff, because
Okay.
I didn't know, we have the same tendencies, but I didn't want to make a mistake, like for example, I remember I did a class, and I ain't gonna say go into details because the teacher's still around, but I didn't want to go in that classroom and like do something irrational. They're like, yo, that's not Uchenna, that's the
Right.
brother. And how long have you been in this class? And now they're coming in and making him take the test all over again. And,
Yeah.
so but we definitely switched. We played on the same team at sports, and so and our numbers were very close, so it was always very interesting to see that. But we definitely switched places, and we definitely had some fun. um, the crazy thing is when we get caught, right? When you get caught, because you don't know what their response is going to be. And I
Mhm.
give you one example. When we were kids, we switched places doing something, and this person goes, "Yeah, I knew you were the younger twin. I knew it was you." You know what I mean? And I was like, "Why'd you say anything?" I just wanted to let it play out, see what was going to happen. And so, yeah, we've had our shares of getting caught as well.
Go ahead, Arlington.
Yeah, I was gonna transition into our military background.
Mhm.
Um, did you both join the military at the same time, or
No,
were you the only one? Okay.
yes, I was. Yes, I was the only one that chose that. I had a very unique path, right, to me getting into the service, and for me, wanting to join the military, right, being an Army brat, watching the military, and especially during the time of war, um, I watched a lot of mental health things and a lot of family problems, right, um, and so I didn't want to. When I was younger, I'm never going to do that. I was set on playing collegiate basketball, playing professional ball, and going where the good Lord may take me with professional athletics, right? But um, I had a unique route. I was a young kid, and we were living in Germany at the time, and I was a sophomore in high school, and music is popular. All I needed was a pencil. I was big into hip hop. My brother was banging on the stairs. We're in the foyer of my high school, and I start rapping. Right, my brother's doing the beat. I start rapping, and I say the N word.
Mm.
Right, and my principal walks behind me. And when this happens, mind you, I was probably one of the best athletes. Me and my brother were a duo, but we were top notch, and um, we had just won a championship. And so I remember my principal tapping me on the shoulder. She let me finish those bars because I was on fire, right? And she told me to go to the office. And there was a crowd of people around us. And me being me, I said, "What did I do? What's wrong? I've never been in trouble with you. What's going on?" And she said, "You know, go to my office now and sit there and wait for me. Long story short, I got thrown out of school for saying the N-word, right? And I remember my father having to come to me and tell me that we're going to have to stand at attention in front of the commander, right? Because this is a DOD school and the way it takes precedence is different. So that was my first introduction, right? I took all TC, and when I took it in high school, I was like, I can't do it. I ain't shining these boots and all of this. I said, Dad, I see you do it. I just don't want to do it, right? This ain't going to be for me. And it's crazy I say that because my all TC instructor now lives probably 3 blocks up the street from me, right? And that's a full circle thing coming from Germany to where we are now. But when I did that experience and I had that, I didn't want to do it. I was very turned off by the military, right? I didn't like the fact that we were moving and we couldn't have stability in a sense. And then the uncertainty of these wars and everything happening, right? Plus, in the same time, my father ended up getting sick. He developed, I won't go into too much detail, but he developed something where the whole unit got sick, and my father ended up going to the infirmary and passing away.
Oh, man.
But before he passed, I remember going in the recruiter's office, and I had a test to myself. I said, I'm going to see what this military is about. We'll see who's the best. Right, we know about the Marines. Everybody knows about the Marines. We're gonna put them to the test. So I'm in Heidelberg, Germany, and I walk in. I said, you know what? I ain't gonna really go in the military. I'm just gonna play with them and see, whoever stands up first, I'll think about it. And I walk in, and nobody stands up to greet me. Right? They all kind of acknowledge me from their chairs. They're on the phone doing busy work, if you will. But the Air Force recruiter stood up and shook my hand. He said, welcome, son. You willing to change your life? And I said, nah, I just wanted to see, I was just doing a little test of myself. He's like, well, okay, if you have any questions, let me know. And, we PCS going to Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And in that process, I lost my pops. But before I lost him, I had a conversation with him. I told him I was going to make him proud. Right. Because me getting out of school, I felt like that was a turning point. See, when I got thrown out of school as a sophomore, I was 16. We stood at attention, and I told my father, I'm going to go to college. And he chuckled. He said, dude, you ain't even finished high school yet. You got big ambitions, but you got to follow the process. And I told my father, let me figure it out. I got it. So now we're standing at attention with this base commander, and he's a 1-star. My dad's just, full uniform. He's nudging me like, don't say a word. Just take it on the chin and let's get out of here. You know what I mean? We'll get ice cream after, you know what I mean? Something just because he knows how my heart moves. But the people before me were students, and they brought a 9-inch blade to school, and I never forget it. And their parents were high ranking, and they just got suspended. But it came to me saying a word that was derogatory, and they threw me out. It was the most awkward and silent ride home, but the light of the tunnel was I seen University of Maryland. And I said, Dad, I'm going to go to this campus. I'm going to go to college here, and I'm going to live my dream and do, He said, okay, son. And 16-year-old kid passes a high school exam and enrolls in college at 16. And my life changed because now I'm living on the barracks. I'm living a full-time student at 16 away from my twin, and I'm living on these barracks, and I'm now full-time around Army, just, and I'm walking in the shop ed and doing different things. And so my interactions is changing. And so I finished up that year. We're on our way to Oklahoma. I lost my father. And we have this conversation before he passes. And I tell him, I'm going to make you proud. And this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go in the Air Force. And this conversation was my father being woke up by the CQ person at 3 a.m. And I'm having this conversation. Never had a conversation like this with my father. And he just laughed. He said, son, I always knew you was going to do something bold, but I never thought you would, go in the Air Force of all things. Like, Man, y'all don't do nothing in the Air Force. And I just, you know what, Dad, you know what? I got you. I'm gonna make you proud. I love you. And I didn't know that was gonna be my last time speaking to him. 2 weeks later he passed away.
I'm so sorry.
And it was the hardest thing. It was in October. I never forget it. It was the hardest thing because here's a guy that he lived his whole life serving this country up until his very last breath. And so now I'm living in that moment, listening to, taps at night with tears in my eyes, just trying to live out the wishes that I said I would have for my father. And so the military, and especially the Air Force, it took me a second to adjust. When I first got in there, I had to pass the ID card, the dependent to the, I had to switch them out. It was a little hard letting that thing go, but the Air Force taught me so much about who I am today, the integrity, the service before self, the camaraderie, right? And excellence in everything you do. That means so much to me. And that's what's kept me alive. That military experience that I went through has forever shaped me, those years that I devoted and beyond, because I'm still in service of our fellow men and women. And, it's changed me, it's given me so much more than what I thought that I would get out of it, and so I know my father's proud.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, he probably had a good chuckle when you joined the Air Force, but someone that's been in the Army for a long time, we all agree that yeah, you had the right choice because if we had to do it again, we'd go in the Air Force.
Look, we do some work. I had an amazing job. I was an air transporter. I was on the flight line. I dealt with every aircraft that touched down that had a passenger or needed fleet service or food or whatever the case may be. And so it was like a load master. Sometimes we got in the air and did things, but it was one of those experiences that like I said, it changed me. The crazy thing is I was when I get to tech school, right? I like military adjustment is hard, right? I won't get into too much of that because you got to get the book, but I my rude awakening came for me in the end of I had just graduated and I had made a mistake, right? Attention to detail is important, ladies and gentlemen. Um, and attention to detail got me recycled in the military. It pushed me back 3 weeks because I forgot I missed a belt loop, right? And I broke that attention span to go, let me look at it. And they made them out, we gonna show you what it means. But the craziest thing is I had graduated. I took the test and I had met every requirement to move on. But I never forget the lesson that I learned in the way this gentleman presented it to me. He said, we can send you on to tech school and you can do your thing and then you eventually go to your duty station. But this moment you'll remember whether you were disciplined, whether you had a consequence, whether you learned from it, anything. But if we just let you go without even a thought of that, then we didn't do our duty, right? And that's where people get hurt. And that's, and so it took me that moment to realize how important and sacred it is to have that honor, even when we mess up, right? And so, yeah, that it happened to me. My drill instructor literally tells me, listen, there's nothing else for you to do. You you go back and help this flight win honor flight and do whatever the TI asks you to do. And you'll be all right. And so it was heartbreaking for me because my mother came down. And that was the first time I had to tell my mom, that I felt like I let her down. And so she gave me, I still look at that picture to this day. She was the biggest supporter. In fact, my mother came to the CQ desk, pushed the button, and gave her rank and name and let me see my son and y'all gonna do him right. And I said, Mom, you can't do that, Mom. You can't, you know what I'm saying? You can't do that, Mom. And I'll be, they let me downstairs. I talked to my mom. I'm like, we got 5 minutes. Give me a hug. I see you tomorrow. It's graduation. Not knowing that the next day would change my life, right? But I'm proud to have served in the military and what I've been through.
Yeah, I was going to ask you all the questions you've already answered, like the values that you've learned, what changed you, what molded you, but you've pretty much described all of that. So I appreciate that, kind of walking us through. But most of that stuff was already instilled in you with your father. But a lot of it is you hear about it growing up through a military
Hmm.
family, but to experience it yourself, yeah, it's a whole different level once you're put in that place. So, um,
Absolutely. Trauma, I think, was probably one
So,
of the biggest things, the biggest adjustment that I had to deal with, seeing it and then experiencing it firsthand, right?
mhm.
And trauma, there's levels to it, obviously. I've experienced trauma as a kid, even up into my adulthood. And I shared this with you all yesterday. One of my biggest things from the military is I'm a survivor. Um, I'm a traumatic brain injury survivor, and I suffered from an attack, and that changed me, right? Because and I'm all banged up, right? I don't know too many people that walk away from the military intact anymore. We're all banged up, and um, I suffered some crazy injuries in the military. The traumatic brain injury being one of the most significant ones, because everything that goes along with that, from mental health to those other things, but you know ankles, you name it, and then having to rely on the same system that we protect to now help me to move on in life is been probably one of the most unique experiences, because if you don't understand it, and you don't know how to maneuver around it, it can be very, very troublesome. It can hurt you, and you won't get the resources and the things that you need.
So, Uchenna, you mentioned that you had trauma since you were a child growing up, right? Even up in adulthood. There are a lot of people that channel these trauma by picking up habits of, well, no, not habits, picking up things that would change those trauma into like talents, like probably playing a piano, kind of like their own therapy. What was yours? What was your way to get away from forgetting the trauma, just to take yourself in a different place?
Being a FICA caller. I'm just I'm just messing with
You need
everybody
to
out
get
there.
away from
Push the like button
Moni.
on that part, right? Oh man,
Moni, if you're listening, please do not give him an A for Samoan language class.
Oh man, shout out to Moni, man. My little Moni, man. Yeah, to be honest with you, I think probably that was a big factor for me, was being able to. All right. I don't want to sound crazy and dumb, right? But I had a patriarchal blessing, and in my patriarchal blessing, it mentioned me having um, the gift of speaking, right? And it talks about being able to invite others into conversations. I don't want to give it all away, but it talks
Yeah.
about that part, right? And I haven't looked at it in a while, but every time I look at it, I'm like, yep, that's the part right there. And so for me, I think being able to use not only the tool between my two shoulders, meaning this
Mhm.
brain, but also the lips, right? And being able
Mhm.
to speak and having those senses, being able to project so much more that's more than me, right? And so, yeah, being able to have that part. But I also, I'm a music person. So I write poetry. I'm in creative writing. That's been always been my biggest outlet. Um, I'm trying to master the guitar right now. So if I can get these fingers smaller, like Brother Is said, big fingers, small keys, ouch, I think I'll be able to master something. But I'm, trying to get confident in moving these fingers around to be able to strum an instrument a little bit more. But I'm working on that. I'm definitely big on channeling, the energy into other things. One of my biggest things is I'm a community builder, so I like to bring people together and show them the value of what they mean. I know people hear it all the time, but now we have to really show and prove. And I think I've been about that and trying to bring as many people as I can together.
Well, which leads you into, and I think we're skipping into a lot of other things, but I wanted to jump in. That's what made you a good basketball coach. How did you get into that?
Oh man, I've been tall my whole life. I think I came out the womb tall. My
Yeah.
mother's, 6 foot,
Hmm.
she's tall, and we, um, my older brother is 6'10", and so growing up, basketball, we played football, we tried every sport, but basketball was one that kind of just felt like the most free, right? If you can master this thing in your hand and project and trajectory and learn how to use angles and math, right? And like it's exciting, right? But the competition was always something that I really liked.
Yeah.
And so the first time I played, I was uncoordinated. I was shooting at two hands and but then I watched others play around me and I just said, dude, I can do this. Um, and being small, being younger, the younger twins, and my brother already being in high school, he would put us right on the court. He's like, man, yeah, y'all damn near taller than me. Get on the court, man, and let's play ball. And so we'd be at like, my banging days was like in Fort Hood, Texas, and so my father's like, we're going to the gym. And like my pop's the soldier, so I know he ain't gonna have no slack when they start arguing on the court. But we're his kids, like what? My brother was dunking, so we're like, what's gonna happen? And my father, first foul I got, he was like, son, you're gonna get a lot of those in this game. Get up, wipe it off. If not, what I'm saying, get off on the side of the court, let somebody take your place. And it was that competition my father put in me early, and then he realized, okay, they're good. They're going to be great. And so, my father ended up taking a pole, like I want to say a four by something, and he dug it on the side of the ground. When you're in military house, you got to be careful where you dig, right? So he digs this wooden post in the ground, puts a basketball goal up on it, and it's on the side of the house. It ain't no pavement. We gonna beat the dirt down with our feet, and that's what he did. And I guarantee, and I could tell you this, we had some of the best competition from that area where we lived in Fort Hood on those streets on that military base. Come to that goal to play, right? They like, okay, your older brother is the stuff. So we know if he out here playing, we need to be out here playing with y'all. And it drove the competition in us. And, you know, plus I love that feeling of just being on a team,
Hmm.
and I, we can, yes, we can play 101 in different things, but um, I just love that teamwork, and I've won a lot of championships in basketball. I've done some unique stuff in this game. I won the first ever Adidas street ball competition in Germany. Right, I have the trophy sitting here, and my mother held on to it, and it remind like I had to beg her to give me money, but we're playing against other people from around the country,
Hmm.
and me and my brother and a German national and a Yugoslavian kid, we won that whole thing. And it's moments like that I said I just want to be a part of that. High school championships, like I said before, my high school disruption and those feelings of being on a team I didn't want to lose,
Hmm.
and so having that competition on the court, I said, I can teach others, what I've learned or what I
Hmm.
didn't learn. And so, transitioning into my first coaching, right? I'm sick. I'm a kid. I'm a kid. I'll never forget it. Now that we're older, I think a lot of those people have moved on, shall we say. But, I'm a 16-year-old kid. One thing that didn't happen to me when I got in that school situation was my father didn't disrupt the natural things that are supposed to happen. He knew that we were talented. He knew that we were good. So he didn't disrupt that. So he allowed me to still be able to play basketball, go around. So, I ended up playing for a rec league and I already had a license at 16. So the coach was like, you could be a player coach. And I'm like, wait, I'm 16. He said, yeah, that don't matter. So I ended up playing on the team, coaching, we won. And then on the way back, he says, you can drive the van too since you got a driver's license. I said, look, I love this job. At 16, I can do this. And, you
Did
know,
he ask you to cook too at the same time and wash dishes?
No, but we did stop at some friend's house, and
Oh, there you go.
he realized, we were on our way back from, this place in Germany, and it was amazing because you know these were other minority kids on this team, right? And he trusted us. Like, yo, man, we're gonna stop over here. We know some folks over here, they barbecuing right now. We're gonna go over there. This is what they do. And we pull up, like, in the van, right? I'm driving in the van. He's like, we can't stay too long, you know what I'm saying? And how old are you? And he's like the big brother chaperone. And it was people like him, meeting Shaquille O'Neal when I was younger, different people that just made me want to be a part of a game that really not only changed my life but got me a free education. And so
Mhm.
I wanted to be, not only be to coach that, but make sure I gave back to that, because it's a game changer.
Mhm.
You're a
You
hooper.
know what? That time when you guys were in Germany, the European players, we sort of like didn't really know about them, right? Like you only seen
Hmm.
them in the Olympics. But then if you look back at it, I mean, those boys were slowly catching up at around that time. And you
Oh
look at it
man.
today, I know, like when I was teaching ROTC, I always loved, playing intramural sports. And I was,
Mhm.
I called out one of my Hungarian students. I said, hey, let's go shoot around on the court. Man, I never seen someone move so fast. I don't think I scored one basket against him. He was just all over the place.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the game is, and we, you know what, we're modeling our, a lot of our stuff after that. I love the European system. I love the way my rude awakening came. We went to go play in Barcelona, right? My college team that I was on, we went to go play, right? We did a tour. So we played and did these different teams. And then Barcelona was one of the places we went. And I remember, coming to this game, like, there's a misconception that everybody is who's black or black descent got Michael Jordan's blood in them. And, I'm sorry, I can jump. I had a nice vertical, but I wasn't no Michael Jordan, right? I was, and so, but I will dunk on you if it came down to it. And I will do something nasty to you. But there was this big misconception. And so I remember going into the Spain, right? And I'm just thinking, this is way before Pau Gasol. I'm looking at them like, yo, these brothers is lanky, they're tall, they look like they're gonna shoot the lights out, right? Lo and behold, man, the first play of the game, the guy comes down the middle, not on me, just punishes the rim. Boom. And I'm like, oh, they dunking like that too? Okay. So I go down and I'm thinking Charles Barkley is, in the league at this time. And I'm thinking I'm gonna go baseline, hit him with a move. I go baseline, hit the move, and bam, right in the chin, right to my lip, man. Bust my lip open. Guy looks at me, he's like, welcome to Barcelona. I'm like, oh, okay.
Mhm.
We like one of the toughest game. Never, I would never want to tarnish the game. So I mean, I had to, pick my chin up and get over to there, get stitched, get my lip taken care of, and get back in the game. And I remember being a part of that and telling my teammates, like, yo, dude, all right, the whole game plan has changed. Look, don't even go in the baseline, draw and kick. We're gonna shoot some threes today. If you want to get punished like I did, go in the paint. Go in there. That's that they were playing tough. And then they had the European step already. So they were doing the 3 steps to the travel already. So for us, it's 2 steps to the travel. We're thinking, okay, how do I incorporate that? So that's where I first learned how to jump stop, and
Mm.
get that extra step in and momentum. And yeah, so the European game is definitely changed. Now I got to tell you this to be a side note, because I shout out to my Usos, man, that were in Germany at the time hooping, because we put it down on those courts too. It wasn't just the brothers. You know what I'm saying? We had our soldiers on there, and we was in Pioneer Concern, and we every Saturday and Sunday, after church, ladies and gentlemen, and we would just be in there playing, right? And it'd be like 15 Samoans in there, volleyball, and then like basketball be happening. Before you know it, everybody like, wait, these jokers can jump out the gym. Like, yeah, man, we play volleyball too, So yeah, good times.
It's funny you mentioned that because my first duty station was Korea, and my sergeant major, he knew I was coming, so he was like long awaiting me, and he was bragging about me. Wait till you guys see this Tasi guy. Once he gets here, yeah, he's gonna show you what volleyball is. And I get there, he's like, Tasi, you ready to go play some volleyball? I said, I don't play volleyball. He said, what do you mean you don't play volleyball? All Samoans play volleyball. I said, nah, growing up in Samoa, we played basketball. Volleyball is like a girl sport. And he was pissed because he had played all army volleyball.
Mm.
And then he said, let's go to the court tomorrow. He seen me play. He was so disappointed. But I think after like 3 weeks, like all he did was train me. And then before you knew it, I was getting better and better. And I didn't even do any army work. So I think for the first 3-4 months, we just toured Korea playing volleyball. I mean, we were just dominating all around Korea.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's hilarious how, when Samoans get together, it's all about, what kind of talent are you bringing? So either you have it or you better learn it quick.
Absolutely. I got to tell you, any sport, like, what's crazy? Watching sports now is so many, it's just not the same anymore, right? We have Samoans in NBA, we have them, we have them in the NFL, we have them in, the WNBA. It's just, it's not, you're starting to see a real cultural breakage happen in the way you've seen sports. I remember being, back in the days in Hawaii and going on Pearl Harbor and balling in the gym, right? We would come out on the court, me, one of my cousins, Playa, and we would go on this court and we would just hoop, and they would look at Playa at the time. He had his, he had a Sogaimiti, so he would be on the court. They're already looking at him crazy, but now he's hooping too. Oh no, what in the world is going? We got a Samoan. No, this ain't supposed to happen, right? And then we're winning like 5 or 6 games. They trying to fight us on the way out, and then why are you hanging with them? You're dark, and so it used to, like, bro, this is my family, and we came to play ball. It like good battles, and then we would have a female on our team. Like, this is no joke, right? I can't make this up. We would go into this place and play ball, right? And I would have my sidekick with me, and we would go in here and like, you had to run to the board and sign your name. And so, they, how hooping was. All right, they try to find out, all right, what your name is. What's your name? They might do it in Samoan if they was playing, but they're going to ask, who is you on the board, right? What number are you? And so they'd see a female's name up there, and she would be playing on the team with me. And we would run them. And I'd pass her the ball, and she would shoot. Or at first, she was hesitant. Like, I don't know, okay, I don't want to, they might block my shot. I'm like, girl, if you don't shoot that thing. And she does that. And she shot it, and we was winning 5 or 6 games. And so, having that kind of breakage in what you see, that helped me. And that's one of the reasons why I coach. And of all things, I coach women's basketball. So, I owe it to that person, to instill that. So thank you.
I was waiting for Janet to respond because small world. So Playa is my first cousin. Our mothers are sisters. So you mentioned Playa.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you noticed the resemblance, but my sister Janet was raised within that family. So she was raised with Playa and the brothers and that family. So I didn't know if you knew my sister because she graduated from Radford in '87. Yeah.
Okay.
Small world. You bring up Playa, and I'm like,
good old Halava days.
The family.
Yeah, I seen Greg not too long ago out in Vegas, man. Total respect. Shout out to the whole family. Yeah.
Uchenna, let's take us back to, you mentioned about the guys around you were saying, what are you doing hanging around with the Usos, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how did that come about with you being because I know you're part Polynesian, Samoan, and so you're married to a Samoan, and your kids are Afatasi, and at the same time you have a Sogaimiti. So tell us about that. Tell us the story about that.
So, yeah, everybody wants to know that story. Should we start charging for that?
We should.
Arlington, we have to get together and do a fun. I don't know. We might have to see some more
We
comments.
should.
I don't know. We might have to mess with our audience. That was something. So I give I guess I can break it down a little bit for everybody. So for me, I was raised by Samoan. I was raised in this culture, in a culture that taught me so much more than just what my skin color was. In fact, the old man, Seu Tango Bailoa, was one of the people who really made me appreciate and understand what is at stake in a culture of um, that that just is bestowed upon just a significant and small group that is held to the highest standard, right? And so for me, um, being in a culture that doesn't, where I don't look like everybody else, right? It was a little different, um, you know, because the love you have for something that has been so, you know, prevalent for you, not everybody might not understand, right? And they might not see that, they might,
Mhm.
they'll eventually feel it as you share your story, but it's not always going to be perceived as equal as you come in the door, right? And so, um, since a young kid, and like I was telling you all, um, we've always had, we've had our family from Fiji, we've had our family from Samoa, and so it was always something that was around us, but never really talked about, or something like that. And so I was just a kid with a unique name. I grew up not knowing who my father was. My stepfather is the gentleman in the army who raised me, who is my father. Eventually, I found my real father, but I knew of who I was in just one sense, that my father was African, and not just African American, but like straight from Africa, as we say, Zamunda. Um, and so I didn't find that out, more of that, till later in life, in my adulthood. But younger, I was around a culture that just was so uh, embraceful, right? And so early on, that's where I was at, and that's what I knew. And I always knew that when I was younger, that I was different. There was something about me. My name, was one thing, and just having these unique features. But you know, a lot of stories and things that you don't know about yourself, you're not going to hear from your family, right? You're not going to hear from um, the people that are um, significant in your life, right? And so for me, sometimes, I knew there was some pain in our family, and there was certain things that people weren't telling or saying. And so I always knew that I wanted to be around family. I wanted to be around something that was important. Um, and so that was um, big for me to not only have a sense of belonging, but to have a sense of purpose and a foundation. And so I was very inquisitive about wanting to know more about me. Who is Uchenna, right? Who is this person with this unique name? And that I was bullied as a kid, because of just having the coarse hair or curly hair days when it's wetter, just being different, right? You got high
Yeah.
cheekbones, you don't look like us, you know what I mean? And so I remember a gentleman by the name of Dana Yamauchi, right? One of the Laia boys. At the time, he was in the 82nd Airborne, I want to say, or 101st in Germany, but he was airborne, him and his wife Manu. And my Fua family and my Fuyava family, and my Nua family, and so many people, the Iramias, and so many people that just wrapped their arms around me and just allow me to get lost in something that was far greater than me. I remember dancing when I was a kid. Matter of fact, I can't remember if Nalu, somebody has a photo with me standing in front of one of the military where we lived in one of the areas back in the 90s, right? And here I am, just this dark-skinned kid with a lava on, minding my business. And as I got older, right, I started to want to know more and more and more and more. And, obviously in church, they talk about genealogy, and, being around my family, right, just watching them, how their understanding of who is next in line, who is this person, how is this family connected, how is this, and telling me to go and do the work. You need to make these connections for your family, but for yourself too.
Mm.
And so, that was very big for me, because that's all that I knew. I didn't know, um, hanging over here with the homies, I didn't know that. I knew, going to Pese, you know what I'm saying, and going to this, and you know, um, coming in to meet for prayer. So, I didn't know a lot of that. I knew how to get involved in it if it was that, but there was a more deeper piece for me that I was trying to understand. And so, you know, Fa Samoa has always been around me. It's always been a part of me. And so, not knowing that I would meet this beautiful lady, and get married in a time where I was probably at my lowest point, um, in life, not knowing that I would meet someone who has also been through tragedy, and pain and turmoil, and, um, and a culture and who they are and what they represent, was so much for me. And so it moved me forward in as far as representing the culture, and trying to understand the language, not just from being in the class, but being as a teenager, right? My earlier days, just being on the back porch of Mirror Rights, like I was telling you, reading the Samoan booklet, and my auntie is telling me, you need to memorize these words, or you need to do this or you need to do that. And so, um, that was something I always wanted to cherish, and not only make sure that it's known what's big to me, but perpetuate that, right? Wherever I go. So when people see that, they don't just see an individual with a tattoo on them, right? They know that it's bigger, because not out of respect, but out of honor, right? And duty, family and God, and so much more, and service, right? I truly value that. And so being around the Uses, right, is more than just the phrase, right? It's more of being around like-minded people and a culture that is meant to to evolve, in so many ways. I get the stink eye every once in a while, but it's not the stink eye where they come up and say something. I think it's just kind of out of curiosity. Um,
When you
but
say curiosity, as in when they see you with the Sogaimiti on, is that what that is?
yes,
Okay.
They probably
so
think you're not even any Samoan, right?
they,
Yeah.
Like maybe some
they
foreigner.
they see some calf muscles. They like, you something, man. You got some calves on you. You know what I mean? You ain't got no skinny legs. You know what I'm saying? You kind of big, But yeah, they asked something. I've been into some places. So I was in Missouri, and I was walking into Costco's, right? Just minding my business, pushing the cart, and the Samoan was behind me. He was like, Malo Pea. And I turned around and looked, and I'm like, okay, I got black shorts on. I'm really trying to blend in over here. And but he can see. And so we have this wonderful conversation. He's talking about Greg and Playa as well. And he was from Halava, in Hawaii. And so we just, had a full conversation. And he gave me his name, and we talked, and, but there's more of that, but then there's more of what people don't see. Like, um, I'm always going to be of service if I've known or anyone that is going to go through that journey. I'm going to make sure that I'm available if they need me, but also I'm going to try to show up, because that was, a part of my process, but also because it's bigger than that, right? What we carry is not just a tattoo. right? You and I know that it's so much more than that. Um, and I do understand the saying of tattoo your lips, right, before you tattoo your body, right? But I also understand that, you know, the completeness of who we are or what is so powerful in our lives is so much bigger than than what we speak of on a daily basis. That I did the honorable way, right? Yes, I went through and asked for permission. Yes, I waited for the right moment. I tell people I wanted to call my pair when I was a freshman in college, right? I wrote Suluape a letter, and I remember speaking to him and saying, "Hey, you ever get this letter from this kid? Blah blah blah." And other people had sent me messages and all that, but when it finally came to that day and the time for that journey, you know, those just so many individuals were there to not only just bear witness, but to make sure that I finish right, that I complete something that is so sacred. And so I'm very grateful for people like Rasati and Suluape, Ricky Boy, and you know, Pisa Tango Vailoa and Suluape Pika, right? So many people have been there for me in this journey, and have just reminded me along it that don't forget what's you've been told, and that's important for me.
Tina, you mentioned during our test run last night that there was about 20 to 30 people. That's a lot of people to be in that room. It must
Oh
have been
yeah,
a very spiritual, humbling experience, as you mentioned, to
it
have those
was.
there. Yeah.
It was. Every morning, we obviously start with prayer and so many things. I did mine in Hawaii. Shout out to Auntie Shelly Selene of Copper Cafe at the time. She was gracious enough to lend us her, get us her space. I was going to go to Samoa to do it. But we were told, just we're coming to Hawaii, just hold off a sec. We'll be there. And everything worked out perfectly because Suluape Tao, his sons Brown and Norman, and they were ready, available. Not just to take the deposit, but they were to ask questions. Up until that moment. Plus, I'm not trying to be funny. I sat down. Obviously, we're sitting down, and he's getting ready to, you know, start on everything, and I cracked the joke. You want to get the white ink out? And he just looked at me. he looked at me, and I said, "Were you thinking that already?" And he just, Suluape Tao was, he was very. When we first met, he was very soft spoken, right? But he, very little words, but I made him chuckle. And, he said, it's going to look perfect on you. You're going to be fine, but, he just reminded me every day, can you handle it? Um, but yeah, it's moments like that. It really is, it's an incredible journey. Being wearing these marks has saved my life as well.
He's also giving you a lot of good advice. And one of the advice talked about, people would judge you based off of your skin.
Yes.
And so, how did you take that with those advice that he gave you? And he gave you, I believe he said something else afterwards. Can you elaborate on that?
So, when we were finished, when he's doing his last markings, um, everybody takes their hand off. They took their hands off of me, and he leans over me, and he says, "I'm going to tell you something after you stand up." And not knowing that was my first test, right? So he asked me to stand, and that was, I just got up. I fixed my lava and got up, and he was like, "Okay." He didn't need any assistance, right? So he said, "You're strong. What I need you to do and what you're responsible for, because people are going to look at you and they're going to say, and they're going to curse at you. They're going to say things under their breath about what you wear." He said, don't let that worry you. You know why you completed this. But this is something that I ask of you, and that is to continue to bridge the gap. Your job is to do that. Bring Samoans and Afakasis, bring people who don't look the same together. and that really, I really took that to heart. In fact, when he was finished, he took the owl and put it over my heart, and that was the picture we took. And I like I said, I stay in contact with him up until up until his death. I visited him in Missouri. I watched him, and he would, people, I would come in there and he would just smile like, you know, you made it. I would tell him I'm his other son, right? But it was, you know, it's the words like that, that have propelled me to not only want to bridge a gap, but it was one of the reasons why Afatasi brand came about, was because of, the identity that we get, the Christ identity crisis, if you will, and so many other things, imposter syndrome. I'm not good enough. I'm not Samoan enough. I'm not black enough. I'm not white enough. Whatever the case may be. In my case, I'm just this melting pot of so many things, and now I'm finding out more things about me. I went to Africa for the first time, and my father's from Nigeria. He's the high chief, in the village, and stepping on my father's land, not knowing this name that I've carried my whole life, what it means, what my name means in this new world that I'm going to. Oh, it opened my eyes up. I brought my daughter raised the Samoan flag in Nigeria in front of the village. That was a proud moment. She said, Dad, I'm not leaving until we do it. She pulled out the 685 and put it up, and like it was a proud moment for her because she's a walking representative of this culture. My kids are walking representatives of these multiple cultures, and I don't want that to slip away from them, so this brand was created not only just to pass on to them, but for all people, not just Afakasis who are of Samoan descent, but all people who are mixed, right? Because that's what it is. It's half of one. And there are a lot of people who just feel like they're not socially equitably, spiritually, and so many things they lack to fit in on that one side. Maybe because they weren't raised there and they found out later in life they got 1% Samoan in them, and now they're proud of that. And they want to be, they finally belong to something. And the last thing we want to do is push them away from learning more about who they are, or even the ones who are learning that want to learn the culture. We don't want to push them away from that because that might be someone that they might love, and your family says, don't bring somebody that don't look like you home, but love has a strange way of working. And, I wanted to push this narrative and push this brand, um, to the people, to the masses, right? And really, give them a voice, right? And so
Mhm.
that's how Afakasi brand came about. And shout out to people, especially in my earlier days when I first started, that came on board as like, yo, dude, I'm Afakasi. You know, um, we had the guy from TV Samoa. I had so many people. I was reaching out to NFL players, NBA players, so many that I just wanted to give them something that they could be proud of, knowing that someone has them in mind, right? All is not forgotten, for a word that really, and some people might find offensive or might not, you know what I'm saying? But I wanted to bring light to that. And so, yeah, that was one of the reasons why I did it. And that's why it's still standing today, so glad to get you some Afakasi brand gear.
No,
I
I
love.
love it.
Oh, go ahead. Go
Because
ahead.
like I shared with you last night, my daughter is half Native American, half Samoan, and she goes through the same struggle like you've mentioned. And
Hmm.
what people fail to realize is when you put pressure on them of not knowing your Samoa, you're also not factoring in the other half or whatever other part that they're also trying to support. So they're struggling in that identity because she goes and does her Native American cultural elements, and she hears the grumbling of the full natives, and they're saying, you're plastic or you're half. You don't know, even though she's was rooted and born and practiced since a child, she still gets that, right. Oh, why are you doing that? Polynesian stuff. And then she comes and goes with us doing our Fala Laves, and then she hears those grumblings, oh, these kids nowadays, that's because, they're not rooted in Samoa. So now they want to abandon it. Like, I'm
Hmm.
not accepted in my Samoa people. I'm
Hmm.
not accepted by my Native American people. But, kudos to you for sticking through it, not just walking away altogether and saying, no, I'm not accepted anywhere, so I'm gonna go be on my own. But you have folks like that will abandon the culture altogether, and they're now isolated. So it's good to hear that you're supporting that voice, that frustration that most people don't understand. I mean, it's a struggle. I see it on a daily with my daughter because when she's asking me questions, and I'm like, why are you asking that? And she says, because I see it on TikTok. People are attacking the Afakasis on TikTok. And not only that, she goes to her native culture and she's like watching those videos and they're attacking, the halves on there as well. So like they don't win. So no, I appreciate that brand that you bring up because you're representing a large voice out there for our people.
Yes, it's quite a responsibility. You know, and I take on that challenge, right? I really want, like I said, obviously there is, you know, completing, the service of what someone has asked me to do, but also it's so much bigger, and I understand why he said that. I wish he was alive right now so I can tell him, you know, and we all, like I said before, we would talk, I would sit there and, but more than ever now, I mean, we've been almost 15 years, with this brand, it's been going, and so um, having that, and then having what someone has said, like I didn't take that lightly, right? And you know, um, it's amazing, right? So I remember like running across like Tanel, and giving her an Afatasi brand hoodie at one of her shows, and Tene Meuli, that we all love on social media. Shout out to her. Shout out to my niece Kaylani as well, who's Afakashi. She's amazing with her hair products. Her and her husband are doing their thing. But it's watching them, right, and watching my own kids. What are they going to be proud of if you give them
Mhm.
nothing,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're going to be proud of what the world wants them to be proud of, right? They're going to be shaped and molded by the community that we don't really might not want to be a part of because of certain things, values, beliefs, whatever the case may be. And so that might distraught them. That might create a imbalance, right? And so there's so many pieces. One of the things, and no one has the right answer, right? I know that some people, like for me, I wish that my kids learned Samoan, right? They're picking up things as they grow old, as they in life, but having the ability, like how we sat in the class, I'm like, especially my son, I'm like, hey son, sit over here and just work this class. At first I didn't even want to speak. I didn't want to come out, I didn't want to do anything, but then the environment and everything was so inviting, right? Moni and everybody was so inviting
Yes,
when
shout out to
you
Moni
know,
again, by the way.
yeah, he
Yeah.
was just so inviting with his conversation, and
Mhm.
right. And so I just said, okay, let me insert myself, whether I make a mistake, I owe it to myself. I owe it to my family, right? And then having conversations, right? Seeing people that I haven't seen since, younger days, right? Like, hey, wait, didn't you used to live in Hawaii over here? And we're talking and, hey, it's just a reunion now. And so, and seeing familiar faces that you haven't seen in a very long time, right?
Yeah.
Having that ability, I want to invite my kids. I want to invite others to be a part of that. And I think that that's one of the things, that I wish I did more of, downside of being an athletic coach, having more time to have those things, right?
Mhm.
A lot of times there's a class going on, it's basketball season, and I'm not going to be able to get in there. So now more than ever, really inserting that so the kids don't lose sight. I don't lose sight as a parent, right? And it just creates a little bit more harmony in their lives.
I love this. I love how your journey has brought you to where you are now. The fact that you went through all these challenges to get you to get your college degree, and also being able to get the Sogaimiti, which led you to the Bridge the Gap that created Afatasi brand. Everybody who's listening and watching, look up Afatasi brand and support a brother. You know, this is a good brand for you guys to look into and to purchase and support. Can I
Definitely.
also
Thank you.
mention that those who are full Samoan that don't speak Samoan also get attacked too? They call plastic, so you know we also need that as well.
And I know that can be rough too, because it's I mean it's I know that can be rough. I mean, I know, like I said earlier, that definitely doesn't weigh good on the mental, because it feels like sometimes you don't feel worthy enough to do something, right?
Oh
Or
yeah,
they make you want to feel, like you're challenging your thoughts. Like, wait, I was still like, my parents are still this, and all of that. But then now, I'm not good enough. It
yeah.
hurts, right? It definitely hurts.
But I like that. I liked in Moni's class where it felt welcoming to be able to just practice and learn the language. And you know, it's embarrassing because I grew up in Samoa, but I just spoke English the whole time, and that's my fault. You know. But anyways, I'm learning, and so I'm very appreciative of the culture as well and everything that comes around it. But it's the fact of the judgmental part, which does get to a person mentally. By the way, let's jump into the part where you're working on your doctorate. So everything that
I
you've
am.
gone through, your doctorate degree that you're working on pertains to what you've already been through and what you want to make use of to help those who are going through the trauma, the mental instability. So tell us about that journey.
Sure. I'm working on. Let me get a little bit more water. Sorry about that.
No, you're good.
Sure. I'm working on a doctorate in human services, DHS. Um, I'm about 25% into it. I'm nonstop. Once you get started
Wow.
on this plan, I'm a full-time student. Um, and so let me say this before anything.
Okay.
Because of what I've been through as a youth, this kid that was thrown out of school as a sophomore at 16, I had to live life off of experiences from that point on, right? I was now separated from my twin. He was still in school while I'm now out of school and going, trying to, and in college and doing different things. When I was in the military, my brother was a senior. When I was going into the Air Force, he was a senior. So life changed so dramatically for me. Education was once taken away from me, right? It was stripped from me, right? They never said you weren't an A, B student. You could write a good report. They took my education from me. And I had to prove to my biggest fan, my parents, right? My mother, my father, my biggest fans, that this wasn't a mistake that happened to me, that this was all designed. This is not, this is, I might have said that word, but that word, and I want to say this because in the context of why it's very important why I got this doctorate. See, that word that I said, they called me that. When I was in the office, they called me that. And I told the lady, I said, "Oh, my mom gonna come up here and tear your tail up. You can't call me that word. I'm saying it as expression, and it's like not even spelt the same way you're saying it. And now you're telling me you hang us up by the flagpoles and went total left field on me." So I watched her have that power to say, Uchenna, you're a great student. You're a great athlete. You're great. You can do so many things. That was a simple mistake. But that stripped everything from me, right? And it made me like education, like I had to go rapidly into it, right? And so as I'm sitting there, um, my freshman year, I'll never forget it. my freshman year of college, excuse me, I didn't, I never tell, don't do this as a student, ladies and gentlemen, but there was one class that I was, I knew everything about it already. So the professor must have been on the same wavelength. He was like, look, you ain't never got to come to my class. You just show up for the midterm and the final. You pass one, fail the other, you'll pass with a D, maybe a low C. You show up, miss one, you pass the other one, you might not be passing, right? And I thought in my head, you know what? I can do this. I'm going to hold him up on that. I showed up for the midterm, got a B, showed up for the final, got a C. And I missed his class because I wanted to get a part-time job, right, in college. I'm working at like Baskin Robbins. And I told the professor at the end, I said, I don't know if you was keeping attendance, but I was one of those guys that took you up on the challenge, right? And he goes, how old are you? I said, oh, I'm only like I'm 16. And he's like, you too, are you in talented and gifted? Are you? I said, nah, dude, I got thrown out of school for saying the N-word. He was like, well, why they they threw you out of school for that? And I'm telling him my story. He said, dude, you're going to forever be in education. This is what this man tells me. He says, you're going to forever be in education, but not in the sense of you constantly going out to get it, but you're going to be forever attached to it. And so, I go to, get my undergrad, went to a Mormon college out in Virginia, played college basketball, had a wild experience there, was called the N-word. I mean, it was a wild experience for me. Faced some things that made me question who I was, right? I questioned my faith. But I just remember I couldn't run. No matter, I'm this dope athlete. I'm this great athlete. I'm going over to VMI, Washington Lee, playing against their players. They're like, well, you need to transfer over here. But I could never leave this institution. And I couldn't run away from this degree, right? And so now you fast forward to a master's, and I wanted to work in education. So I got a master's in special education, right? I knew that I wanted to be around the people who need me the most, right? And that was special education, right? And then I obviously ended up getting another master's in sports management. But then my doctorate came about, and I told myself when I was young, I said, I want to get my doctorate before I turn 50. I want to set out to do this, but it's expensive, right? Education is not cheap. And I put it off, I put it off, I put it off. And um, there was this one moment where a lady called me. She said, hey, I see you were interested. I said, look, man, I ain't even clicked the send button. How to call? Computers is crazy nowadays, because that's how I didn't even push send. I guess it was in the add to cart moment, right? And so they got that and so she said, I'm calling you because I see that you filled everything out, but you didn't push the send. And so I'm like, well, that's why I was going to ask you, like, why are you calling me? And she says, you got everything on your resume. You should go out and be of service to the people, right? And I said, you know what? Nah, I ain't gonna do it. I ain't gonna do it. I ain't gonna do it.
Uchenna, so real
Mhm.
quick, did you get into the nonprofit organization that you're in right now before or after you got before?
Before the
Okay.
vice president. I got into that before, just because I had been doing so much work around the country with
Hmm.
mental health and all that, that when the lady calls me, I said, nah, I ain't gonna do it. It's expensive and everything. She goes, well, listen, just try your first course out. And we have, applications for scholarships, yada, yada, yada. And I said, you know what? Okay. And I went to sign up and I didn't put my application through. She called me back maybe 3 days later. She said, listen, next year, this program is not going to be around. So, but if you start now, you'll be in the program and everything will be there for you. And so I told her, I'm really nervous because I'm going to be real with with my situations, right? I can't go and get an education and not want to be go get this degree and not be in the field or working with the community that needs me, right? I don't want to. And then, education, I'm using real world, the I perspective, right? I'm talking about me and my situations and the people that we see, right? And now I want to be effective to them. And she said, you know what, this is going to be perfect for you because you can do just that.
Mhm.
And so I took my first class, fell in love with it, got a great grade. I said, you know what, I can do this. And so, now I'm, doing vice president work for this Lions Collective and working in mental health. But I travel the country speaking about it because the line of field that I want to work in is our BIPOC community, our people of color, our people that are black, brown, indigenous, right? Are the ones who are marginalized, that don't have the resources, that are not getting the funding, um, that don't have the voice. Um, and so I'm putting this degree to work for them, because now is an opportunity where I can sit at the table and those real world stories are going to be heard. That
Yes.
pain, that suffering, is now going to be heard because I've did it at the highest level. And I want to be able to bring people now to the fold with that.
Let me ask you something, Uchenna, and I'm
Sure.
very proud of you. I've said this to you last
Thank
night.
you.
It's been years since I've last talked to you. So since then, you've come a long way. Um, Let me ask you about the field that you're in. What do you see as far as our Polynesian people, what they're facing as far as the mental aspects of things?
You
What do you
know,
see a lot of?
I see a lot of hidden trauma. I see a lot of sweeping under the rug. The mentality of, um, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? Um, um, and right now, more than ever, we're coming into like this enlightenment, right? Nothing is new up under the sun. Things that have been happening since the beginning of time. It's just where we've lost our voice at, where have we lost the spirit to do, to be able to speak. And so that hidden trauma is attributed to that. Um, and the roles that we have, especially in the Polynesian community, are similar to the the African American community, the Nigerian community, the matriarch and the patriarch roles and the nurturing and things like that. But what I do see is a lot of trauma where people are not able to speak up, right? For fear of retaliation, fear of guilt, opening up a whole wormhole of stuff that's probably been going on for years. Um, and I've had to see that within my own family, right? With individuals who have been that have had damage done to them, like confront them. Why can't you confront them? Well, it's nobody was going to believe me, or they're going to say it's my fault, or you led to this, or it's so there's so much guilt, blaming, and so many things. But the one thing we never ever talk about is how to heal. See, we can always talk about how we're hurting, but no one wants to talk about the process of healing. And I think that more than ever, now is the time to do that because there's so many pieces that hurt us, right? Like there's so many statistically, right? And what I'm seeing, like there are a lot of things attributed to just the words you say to put on someone's consciousness. So when we start in like putting them and raising them in this, the things that we know are not going to be healthy for them, then imagine what they're going to be like when they get older, right? Um, so I would like to see in the community, especially in our Polynesian community, more community involvement and initiatives at the grassroots level about mental health, about suicide prevention, about escaping or how to escape these realities that are hurting us. Who can you run to build trust? Some people don't even trust themselves, let alone trust others. And so how do we start to instill that, right? Without judgment, because that's one of the things that is always going to hurt a community is that judgment, right? That comes with it.
You mentioned that all we do is talk about the issues, but no one's ever talked about the healing part. What is your now? I know we mentioned before that we probably need to charge our audience, when it came to asking about the Sogaimiti, but we
Right.
probably need to charge too about asking about the healing part.
Hmm.
But as far as the healing, what would your suggestions be to those who are trying to find healing? What are your thoughts on that for our Polynesian community? Because we've already talked about, being afraid to speak up, being afraid to, we just don't have a lot of trust in others. So,
Yes, and our audience member, thank you for sharing that. I was reading that as well. Thank you. Is it Jeanette?
oh, let me
Thank
read
you,
that real
Janet.
quick. Yeah, let me
Um,
read that real quick. She goes, Janice says, thank you. That's very touching because my two older children are Afakasis and they feel out of place many times. I'm blessed to know that we have this for our kids. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. And
oh,
then
you're good.
Tofoi, yeah,
You're good. I
go
just
ahead,
seen that. I
Christina.
seen it pop up on the screen, so I was like, "Oh, okay." I was trying to read at the same time.
I got caught up with your story, so go ahead.
No, no, no. And what was
Oh,
it?
she's
You had a
got
question.
another one. Hold on, before it gets let me read real quick.
Absolutely.
Yes, hidden trauma stunts our growth. We need to heal in order to move forward in a healthy way. That probably explains me being short too. Just kidding. But
That
it is
stunt your
true
growth,
though.
huh? That really stunted your growth.
Yes, still trying. We need to learn how
Yeah,
to communicate healing. Yes,
yeah,
that is so
absolutely.
true. Yeah.
Not only communicate it, but right, we have to advocate, right? That's the word that I want to say we have to start doing more of, right? Is advocating. I start to feel like I'm a politician when I put my hand up like this.
So when you
But
say
we
yeah, when you say advocate, what do you mean by advocate? Because there's so many different ways people can look at advocating.
so for me, right, advocating, there's so many avenues to that. Standing up for those causes, right? Standing up for change. Not being afraid to share your story, right? Right
Yeah.
now is mental health awareness month for men. Advocating for our men to speak up more, right? I want to advocate for our women to encourage our men to be able to share those feelings, right? Because not only are you the nurturers, but I mean, we a lot of us men show out just because of you, right? And so now advocating, look, you ain't gotta be tough. Show those feelings, but share them amongst your male friends. Encourage them to want to speak out more, right? Another thing is not just advocating is one piece, but forgiveness. We got to forgive for ourselves so that we can move forward to forgive others as well, right?
Mhm.
We can forgive people all day, but do we really forgive ourselves for what has happened, right? Can we really have that to move forward, or is it going to weigh us down, right? So we have to preach that more to our communities, especially in the aspect of some trauma has been done because of that, and because of that, you know, I need you to learn how to forgive, right? This person, forgive them so that you can heal, right? And eventually, we hope that they heal, but in the process, you've got to be the biggest advocate for yourself, right? Not being able to share when you're not feeling right, telling someone, "Hey, today is not my day," right? Sharing with someone, especially if something's boggling you down, finding someone you can confide and trust in, and being able to share. You don't have to give them all the meat and potatoes, but just something so that someone is aware. There's a commercial. I don't know if you ever seen this one, you guys, but there was a commercial where a gentleman, there's two people sitting at a soccer game, right? And they're both cheering on the soccer team. They're both cheering on, and they show game after game. And, the guy's cheering loud. The other guy's kind of just sitting in the chair, hey, but at the end, it's only one sitting there in the chair. Who do you think was missing? Was it the guy cheering loud, or was it the guy in the chair like, was like,
I was just gonna think the opposite and say the guy that was cheering loud.
the guy that was cheering loud is the one who killed him, that unalived himself. right?
I
And
figure.
so that's where we are in this world. Is everybody, we have this mask on,
Hmm.
and we right now is a time where we all need to heal, right?
Yeah,
There's a pain that we all are dealing with, and if we can start to encourage that dialogue, I think we'll be okay. We can start that process.
I appreciate that, Uchenna. Thank you so much. Um, you
Yes,
know,
and validating each other's story. Thank you.
yeah.
You're absolutely right. Acknowledging that, right? Because we deal
Hmm.
with so much. One of the things that I do with people.
Hmm.
So I started a new series. It's called Stories from the Ride, right? And it's just the journey of life. And I ask people some of the hard questions, right? And one of the things that I want people to be able to understand, especially with hard stuff, is the vulnerability that goes along with that, right? We have to acknowledge that within people, especially for people being vulnerable to step up and share what they just been through, right? It takes a lot of courage, right? A lot of emotional stability to share when you have been done wrong, hurt, offended, um, something traumatic has happened to you. It takes a lot to do that. And we have to first and foremost thank someone for just coming to that space and place and time to be able to share that first and foremost, and then from that point acknowledging that, and then telling them, how can we move forward, not only for you but together, because now you're invested in that. That's now a part of your well-being, right? You want to make sure they're doing well, and so having that, right, and holding each other accountable is something big too.
Janet goes on to say, also letting them know it's a safe place to share and listen to each other. Mhm.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
I wanted to switch gears, and I appreciate you giving us those advices because that's something that even though we've heard it before, we forget because
Hmm.
we intentionally don't want to share because of the trauma that we've been through and the experience of feeling like betrayed and
Absolutely.
so with this podcast we try to tell everyone you come up here, tell your story, your journey, and you start to realize that everybody is the same. It's just different paths, but it's the same type of experience in different ways, and we can learn from each other and build up with each other's experience. And so, with that said, I wanted to ask, as the younger generation is coming up, you have three beautiful children. How do they see their father? Especially with them being Afakasis, right?
Hmm.
I love the fact that you instill their Nigerian side and
Yeah.
also their Samoan, and they're so proud of that. What do you want to leave with your children and be able? And what do you think they'll say about their father?
Um, Dad is crazy. Will be my dad is crazy. Nah. Hmm, that is a very great question. You know that. Well, each kid is different, right? All my kids are 8 years apart. Um, my oldest kid had it different than these, the middle child and my youngest. My oldest just graduated with a master's degree last week in teaching.
Congratulations.
Thank you,
Yeah.
master's in education. She's going to be a teacher. She's an AKA. She's in the community. Matter of fact, she was on the committee today to help plan the Juneteenth celebration in this city, and just blossoming to just this phenomenal woman, right? My middle child, my son, has been going through a lot, trauma in school. He's, you know, like, I encourage him to be in the poly club. He's running through that. You know, um, you know, I don't know, Dad. I might be too black for them. I'm like, dude, stop. I'm like, dude, you were dancing for the president of the United States, man. You danced on the mall as a 3-year-old, 4-year-old kid, like our whole family was in a dance group, and so, you can do these things, and that's a part of you. But also, don't be afraid to invite people into your world, and so for him, there was I won't say an identity crisis. I think it was more for him, wanting to please like his father, wanting to please everybody, you know. And so his resilience, I think, he sees that in me more than anything, because what he's been through at school, like I said, the trauma, and just most recently, an individual brought a gun to school and tried to lure my son into the bathroom. And my son, by the grace of God, he's alive. And so my son sees everything in the reflection of a mirror for himself as me. So for my daughter, right, I don't speak woman. That's what I tell everybody. I don't speak woman, right? Just like you wouldn't speak man, right? There's certain languages that men speak, and certain
Mhm.
women, they get to do their own thing. But we speak togetherness, right? And so for my son, we speak the same language. And so for him, um, he sees everything in my reflection. So he knows everything that I've been through, and I've reminded him of, the choices we make, but also, being proud to be Samoan, being proud to represent a culture, being proud to be Nigerian, you know. And so for him, it's almost like, do as I say and not as I do. Um, but my youngest, she's absorbing everything. She knows she's got these older brothers and sisters, these older brother and sister that are in the world doing things in the community and all these things. And so she wants to be like them. In fact, when my daughter became an AKA, my youngest, Tuai, grabs her stuff and yells out in front of everybody, "I'm going to be an AKA next." And the whole room is sighing and laughing. And, so, they see that. But one of the biggest things that I want is whatever I emulate for them, I want them to really know why it's being done, right? And I think that is what they see more than ever, right? I do a lot of explaining, because of having a traumatic brain injury, and I shared this with you all. There are things that I have to cope with, right? That I have, that I didn't know when my family, when they were younger, right? That could have hurt them, that could have made them feel inadequate, that like I said, I was dealing with amnesia as well. So that I didn't know. And I asked them, when, as they get older, I preach more about forgiveness, and, or I invite them into what I'm going through, right? So that they can see and not base it off, okay, dad is quiet today, but they know, okay, dad just had a meeting today, or, so that's one of the things that I want them to know. But I think more than ever now, they see dad as just, someone who just wants them to be not only the best person they can be, but to leave a legacy behind. I preached that to them early. Like, tomorrow's not promised. So I want you to just live for today, but make sure you're doing everything the right way you possibly know how to, and if I haven't shown you that, tell me, hold me accountable, don't be afraid. Don't and don't come to me out of frustration. Come to me with the understanding of, you can do this, right? We have to speak the language of togetherness. And so that's what they see more than anything. Plus, you know, like I said, I just don't talk it, I do it. So I'm in this community, I'm traveling. They see dad on the screen over there. They see dad talking on this. They know that it's real, and so I try to invite them in my world as much as I can, but also how much they can tolerate as well.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you sharing that, Uchenna.
You're welcome.
Father's Day is coming up tomorrow. And so, it's It's a blessing that you're able to have that as being a father, because you you know you I can honestly say that your father who passed away is very proud of you, and the blessing that in this lifetime you're able to also find your biological father. Isn't that amazing for you? And so happy Father's Day to you. Happy Father's Day to Arlington, and I hope you guys have like the best gomai tomorrow.
I'm fasting.
And yeah, be well rested.
No, I'm gonna eat tomorrow. Good. Yeah, I was just thinking about that when we got on the show. You know, I'm very fortunate. I think about my father, right, the one who raised me. He passed away at 35.
That's
You know,
young.
very young, right? To see my mother and know she lost her husband. He was 35. She never remarried again.
Yeah,
And I just lost my mom 4 years ago, right?
yeah,
In July, actually. And one of the things that I'm grateful for was, and I said this to my real father, first off, I owe it to this man for becoming the man I am. I don't hate you or despise you because you weren't there. There was decisions that were made, right? If I would have thought of those things as a kid, and there are kids that are dealing with that, mother or dad ups and leaves, and the kid feels like it's their fault. But I'm so grateful that my father, who raised me, right, my father never spoke of anybody else. He wore that father badge. I didn't call him that's my stepdad. That's my father. And his love was unconditional, right? And so when I found my real father, um, my senior year of college, man, we talked about that through genealogy, right?
yes.
Classes. Finding my real father and having him, right? Because it was, I was sad that I had kids and my father couldn't hold them.
Mm,
I had these beautiful kids and, you know, everybody loves G Mama, right? But I wanted my father to be there too. I wanted them to be able to hold these kids. And, you know, so when I found my real father, I made sure that I was able to piece my mother and my father together for that brief moment, if they could tolerate
yeah,
each other, but not knowing that they were very cordial and they were cool and nothing, hey, it's you ain't getting me back and all that other stuff. They didn't have to do all that. They were, my father has 7 other kids, and so that was a whole new family for me. But having that honest coming to myself about, what I've been through now being a father and then having found my my real father, it's just allowed me to see a lot more clearer the responsibilities we have as dads, right? To be there for these moments for our kids. And I wouldn't take anything away from it. Every day is Father's Day. Every day is Mother's Day, right? We can't get no awards. There ain't no. I mean, they do have some, but man, everybody should be getting Father of the Year awards. Everybody should be getting Mother of the Year awards, but on days like the ones that are significant, like tomorrow, I'm just grateful that I do. My dad, my real father, is still alive, and that we have a cordial, and and I tell him I love him. I love him. He's my father. He gave me life. And so having those moments, it's crazy because this is around the time we were in Nigeria, and having that moment to see him with tears in his eyes, and then him telling me the story that we were almost going to be raised in Africa. So I would have never even existed in America for him hearing the stories, of what he told me. And, I'm grateful to have a new chapter and to have these new things and brothers and sisters all because of this man. So, it's a privilege and an honor to be a father. It truly is.
Go ahead and share. I want to hear about the your Cherokee lineage. I mean, I love that share of yours.
So I was So yeah, let me grab something, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
Give me one sec, because this is significant to
Hmm.
what Brother Arlington is asking. So, I've been big on family history, right? I'm trying to learn more about myself. Um, and
I'm sorry, it wasn't
so
Cherokee, it was Seminole, right? All
Seminole
right.
Indian,
Just to
yes.
make sure I get that correct.
So right, genealogy, like I said, as a kid, I knew I was different, right? I knew that there was things about me that I would find out, excuse me. And before my mother passed, I told my mother that I would find out, who she is, who her family is, more about us, because, growing up, um, I didn't know certain family members, right? And like I said, my grandmother had me had custody of me. I was a ward of the court, and then my grandmother, and then it was, and so life for me was very different.
Hmm.
But one, I'm sitting down with like I said, with my mother, and I told her I'm gonna find family. That's how I found my father, right? Genealogy, right? Sitting in the church having talks about it, and then coming to the moment where family members, I start reaching out to them, and I end up getting a family tree dating back to the 1800s,
Hmm.
right? And I can see my mother and them's name on the family tree. It's amazing, right? Um, but my grandmother just passed away, right? She passed away Easter Sunday morning, 4:54, and that's how much she meant to me. And so when I went to go lay her to rest, I you know I asked my grandmother's brother. I said, "Hey, uncle, tell me about you guys' great grandmother, right?" Because and I was explaining this earlier. Like some of us like can remember great greats if your knowledge,
Hmm.
but I can remember great grandma. Great great unless they were like 10 years apart, 20 years apart. Hopefully it wasn't 10, but 20 years apart, 15 or something like that. Then maybe because of the age difference and they're young, but
Hmm.
I I don't remember, and so he's telling me the story about great about grandmother that would be like four times great for me. Um, but he's talking about it and he has tears in his eyes and he's telling me about it, him pushing her in the wheelchair and him taking care of her in her last days. And so I said, well, it, the way it started off was I said, okay, Uncle Butch, I got some questions about our family. Sorry about that, the thing fell. But I got some questions about our family, right? Because my grandmother had this my grandmother had a lot of pictures, right? The elderly they keep pictures, they preserve a lot of records, and some of them pictures would be like a black and white photo with it is just it's almost disintegrated in the frame
Yeah.
almost. But and you looking like, is he looking at me or has he got any eyes? Is those glass? So many things, right? And so there was in particular, there's a picture that was uh, a circular photo, and it was this white woman. And so I see this Paulungi lady on the wall, and I'm like, yo, grandma, who is that? They're like, she's like, oh, that's my grandmother, but that's it. They don't give no more detail. I'm like, but she white, like I know we had some white in our family, man. Like this is direct. So they kind of keep it to themselves. They don't say much, and so but I need names because names help, right? We need that
Hmm.
name, and we can
Yeah.
pinpoint certain. So I found myself one day gazing at the Paulungi lady on the wall, like, okay, what is your name? Who are you? And grandma's gonna tell me eventually, right? But there's trauma in families, right? And there's
Yeah.
pain, so they'll keep it to their
To
dying
themselves.
breath,
Yeah.
right? There's a lot of people that in their graves like with that as well, and so my grandmother's brother was like, okay, so you got questions, I'm gonna lay them down for you, and so I'm like, so the white lady on the wall, who is the lady, right? And he's like, okay. So he's like, I'm gonna tell you a name, and he gives me. So I immediately pull my phone out and I was writing down the name. He goes, that's my great, our great grandmother, right? Her name is such and such, and she's full-blooded Seminole Indian.
Mm.
And I'm like, get out of here, man. You gotta be kidding me, right? Like, you kidding me. I had some explicit words because I was just like, yo, nobody, like, I can't make this crap up, right? Not only am I finding about who I am, but man, we got real, like, not saying it to say like a joke, like we got Native American in our family, like we really, like, this is real Seminole Indian. He goes, yeah. He goes, but you ain't heard the rest of it. So I go, man, it can't get no better than this. He goes, yeah, man. And her husband was Tongan.
There you go. That's the part right there.
I was waiting for that.
And I said, Uncle Butch to be exact. I said, Uncle Butch, you're kidding me, right? He goes, man, Malo Ilele. I go, what? You know, what?
He kept that from you.
I said, you're kidding me, man. This is like 1800s type stuff, right? There's not too many records. So he goes, and I said, well, I'll be, man, that 1% Polynesian. Well, there it is, right? Okay. So he's laughing. He was like, oh, they never told you. So I told him, Uncle Butch, man, I'm not heartbroken. Like you like I immediately text the family. Like soon as he told me, I'm like, yo, guess what, man? We got some target in us too, man. We going out, we throwing tees up, man. You know what I'm saying? So it's gonna be a whole war in our house nowadays for rugby season, right? So he's like, yeah, he was Tongan and he married a Native American, and that was our great grandmother. And so, obviously text the family, text the missus, like, yo, man, we got touched. She's like, shut the, I'm like, no, I'm serious. Like, look, I gave her the name and everything. And she's just like, wow. So my uncle's getting old, right? My grandmother's brother, he's everybody's favorite uncle, but he goes, I know you big on finding the truth. So I have something for you. And he gave me this roll right here. And in this roll is the Seminole map. And families are broken down. And so he gave me this and he said, it's now your turn to do the work.
Wow.
Find our ending, right? Which is the beginning, right? Find it. Keep this as long as you need to. You better send it back, though. That's what he did tell me. You better send it back. I said, I got you, Uncle. You know what I'm saying? It might not ever come back, but I got you, Uncle. But I will cherish this, and I will make sure, not only because I'm proud to know that, I'm going to make sure that I instill that proudness in my brothers and sisters, right? And so I haven't even cracked it open. He showed it to me one time, and I had so many tears in my eyes because, like, here I was, this ugly duckling, this kid growing up that didn't know a thing about himself, didn't know who he was, but knew that he was something different. He was proud no matter what. And it's all coming full circle.
Yeah.
And so I'm very humbled and grateful that I'm alive to not only do the work, but I know my mom is saying, he said he was going to do it. And one thing about Uchenna, he's going to do what he says he's going to do. You see, my name, Uchenna or Uchenna, means God's thoughts. And so I've kind of lived my life like that. Like what, not the WWJD, but what would God really do? And I try to get closer in moments like that of truly finding peace, right? And this is one of those moments. This is priceless moments that will bring peace to your life and understanding, right? Because if you don't have knowledge of self, then you have knowledge of others, and you'll never find out who you are.
Yeah, I love your story, and going back to what Suluape had mentioned to bridge the gap and listening to your story, everything is connected. And the
Yeah.
more you're researching, looking through your lineage,
Yeah.
you're learning more and more about your Polynesian heritage. Now you're learning about your Native American ties and your Nigerian ties and Samoan ties.
Mhm.
And a lot of what you're doing today is what the Samoan people do. They're always looking for their family tree, right? Just go as far as you can.
Hmm.
And your journey is the journey that I took in looking for our lineage, and then discovering the sensitive items, sensitive topics that you've mentioned. There's trauma, and family doesn't want to explain certain events that they're aware of, and they take it to the
Hmm.
grave. So the more I researched, I'm like, okay, I found my Tokelau ties and I found my Tongan ties. Of course, I knew of Samoan, but just to know that you had that Tongan line, and when you mentioned you found about your Tongan ties, it frustrates you that you watch how we argue today between especially the Samoans and Tongans, because you want to bridge that gap, but you always see there's so much confrontation. But I want to capture what you're saying, be the person that bridges the gap. And
Mhm.
I try to emulate that as
Hmm.
much as people attack whatever, because I put a lot of Samoan stuff out, and I get attacked for from the Tongans as well. But then how do I explain that I'm trying to bridge the gap, because I do have that Tongan blood within me. But that's the biggest piece. I love your story, because I think you've come full circle, and you're
Yeah.
discovering it, and you're
Yeah.
you're almost complete there. So um, I pray
Yeah.
that you complete it all together, and I'd like to hear when you reshare that with us one day.
Mhm.
Yeah. You almost got. I mean, like, I got tear. I have some tears, man. Like I said, I mean, there's so many doors that are going to be opened, right? Um, like, I almost gave up. I almost gave up, right? I mean, we all have those thoughts at times, and because I just felt like I wasn't good enough, like, battling an injury, seeing what the future has for you because of an injury, right? I almost, but I knew that there was something greater than me, and I knew that I was special, right? Um, like, no one has all the answers, right? And I know that for people who are trying to find themselves, who are trying to learn more about who they are, their culture, what is holding them, um, you know, um, that's keeping them elevated, right? Um, I just want to encourage people not to give up for that, right? And do no saying I'm trying, say I'm doing, right? I have a friend of mine who's by the name of Sticky Fingers from the group Onyx, right? The rap group Onyx. And shout out to Sticky. When we have conversations, it's him reminding me when I say, man, I'm trying. Nah, man, you're doing. I'm work. You've done it. It's done already. Changing that mentality was something that was important, because if I wouldn't have thought about that, then me not wanting to have that inquisitive mind to ask my uncle about their family, especially in a time of grief. This man could have been like, "Yeah, nephew, man, shut up, leave me alone." You know how people get, man, boy.
Yeah.
You know, get out of my face. You know what I'm saying? Anything. But for him to have that moment, right? That true God love, because that's what's coming out. He's pouring out what the ancestors have bled and died have put in records of
Mhm.
speaking, right, and storytelling. That's what he did for me, and it's so crazy because that night he takes me out, right? I love my uncle, right? He takes me out and we go out and we're going around the town and he's taking me around his little areas, right? So they're like, okay, everybody knows my uncle. But then they're like, okay, who is the brother that's with you? And they like, well, he don't look, he got like chinky eyes, and he look a little different. Like, who is, and he's like, that's my nephew, right? That's my sister's grandkids, right? So
Mhm.
and he but I heard him speaking one day, right? At this when we were at this out, the night on the town. And what he said to me, the reason why I'm still clutching this thing is because he said I gave him a piece of knowledge that he will never forget. And for that alone, I taught him everything he knows. So, that means so much to me because like I said earlier, who we are and what we carry with us is so important, right? These materialistics, it's not going to matter in the end. You
Yeah.
ain't going to be able to drive no Charger at 90. You
No.
barely going to, hopefully you can scrub your own body, but, but those memories, right? The people we wrap ourselves around with, hopefully, and we pray that they'll be back. And so, you know, I'm grateful for that. And as I get closer to my ancestors, as I get closer to the culture that I'm now finding out about myself, I just want the people to know I'm not. Yes, I'm going to try to get my Native American card. I want to see if I want to do the research when the time is right. I would love to go and get that. No, I'm not. Coming in officially to over claim that I'm 100% Tongan. I'm not going to do that. I might throw a T up here and there. I will show you this. The record. But making light of the situation. But I am here to bridge a gap. So when you see me, don't be a stranger, please come up and speak, and I'm here to love. I'm here to connect. I'm here to collaborate. So, yeah.
I just want to say congratulations. You may have, whether you understood it or not, but there are certain people that are entrusted with, what we call in Samoan Measina, right? So
Mm,
these are the treasures that you probably didn't know existed within your family, but now the torch is passed to you, specifically you for a reason, because someone has looked at all the research and the efforts that you are pursuing and said, this is the one. Because there are so many other ones to your left, to your right, that they could have given it to, but they were waiting for that one day. Which one is going to rise, right? Like they say in Samoa,
mm,
right? Where is
mm-hmm.
the person going to rise to carry on, the family jewel? So,
Hmm.
or family treasure. So, congratulations,
I
you're
agree with
the
you on
one.
that. It's Arlington. It's crazy you say that. When I went to Nigeria, my twin didn't make it. It hurt. It hurt because that was an experience I wanted to have with him. Like we made it, man. I cried. You know, um, I'll share this with you. When I got to Africa, first off, they were like, you're military. I'm like, bro, I got locks in my hair. I'm like, wait a minute, how can you? He's like, man, your demeanor, because my head's on a swivel. I'm looking, checking six. I'm back on the wall, And so the guy, he's a soldier in African. So I'm not trying to tell him I don't want to be kidnapped or nothing like that. So, I'm trying to keep low profile, right? In and out through the airport. But my last name, right? Um, they see the Eze and they say, do you know who you are? And to hear that, in a land that you're from, it really is profound. It really made me go, I really don't know who I am, but that's why I'm here, right? And my first introduction to who and what my family name is in the Nigerian culture, shook my world, right? When people know about your family and what they've done for society, took me through a whole new world. I'm in the airport in Abuja, right? We get, and then we're flying in. So I get into Abuja, and Abuja is very dangerous, right? Abuja is a very dangerous place.
Wait, what's Abuja?
Abuja is a place in Africa. It's Nigeria. Used to be one of the most dangerous places to go in Africa, right?
Okay.
Kidnappings and just a lot of stuff was happening. The Chinese government is, they're big in Abuja right
Got
now.
it. Okay.
So they're big, airport, everything. Multi-million-dollar airport they just built too as well. So when I got there, I flew in the night. You do a night mission. You just, that's the worst time that, as they say, the crazy people are out at night, right? So I'm minding my business. I go outside. One of the rules that I have is always bring a pack of cigarettes when I travel international, right? Because you get, because they're smokers, taxi drivers,
Yeah.
you can give them one. It's like a peace thing, right? Especially if they're American. So I brought me some cool Snap 100s. I brought them right on the plane with me, man. I brought 2 packs to be exact. And I get out there and they I'm out in the front and they just like 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 I fly on honey. They just swarm me. Oh, you're American. What's up, Rasta? And I don't speak. I don't say a word. I'm looking for a driver to take me to the hotel, right? But they won't let my driver in because he is not a taxi person. So, so now my military is kicking in and I'm standing up, like I'm yelling at back up and yada yada, let the driver through. And so people run up on my car and, the guy's like, oh, you're good. We're flying down the road and Nigeria is crazy, right? But the next day when I get to the next airport, I fly in, and now I've got my first introduction of the police and the security. And so when I fly in, I'm like still tight shut, right? I don't want to say a word. I just, I'm like the, but this gentleman, he grabs my passport. He's getting ready to do the stamp, and he goes, like I said, the other guy earlier asked me, do you know who you are? What's your name? And so another guy asked me that as well. And I said, I don't, man. I'm here to find out, right? Um, so he says, come with me. And he takes me outside and he shows me my family in pictures on a wall. Like, this is your family.
Yeah, like your
Like,
royalty.
yeah, like you're like a descendant of the kings.
Mhm.
Wow.
And this is you. Come with me, come with me, come with me. You see that? That's your family. He goes, in fact, I know your father's village very well. Be very careful when you go there, because you will go. But when you go, do me a favor. Go in the back, find the most secluded spot, take your shoes off, and bury your feet deep into the dirt. Make sure you're by yourself because the dirt is going to make you feel everything, all the emotions. And when I went, I remember we had drivers, right, with guns. We had armed security, but they couldn't go to the village. They're not allowed with guns in the village. My father, my dad is strict. He's telling us when we were getting into the village, no. But I'm listening on the way there. My father's telling stories of his youth. My father fought in the war in Africa. He was injured. He's a hero. He's a war hero too. And so he's telling us stories, and then lays one story on me that changes my life. He goes, 2 weeks before you guys got here, they massacred 14 people in the village next to us. So I didn't want to bring you here, but this is destiny, and nothing's going to stop destiny. Nothing's going to stop fate. Even if it's your last breath, this is destiny. And so I remember in secret, I told the driver, when we get there, just give me a moment by myself. Don't let anybody come wherever you take me. Don't let anybody come past that point. Because he knew my father's village, he knew exactly where to take me. So my father's rebuilding a home there. And he took me in a part of the foundation that was secluded and it had doors around it. And I did exactly what this man said. I took my shoes off, I cleared my mind, and I buried my feet deep into this dirt,
Mhm.
and just every bit of my ancestors took over me. The sorrow, uncontrollable tears, everything came over me, right? And I was anew. And then my daughter raises a 6'8" fly fag up right on the other side of me, right? She's Faumuing over there, and I just remembered at that moment. Now you're going to move forward with purpose and with reason, and so I want to encourage people, man, to just especially for those who are trying to find themselves, is don't stop
Hmm.
and don't give up, right? Because you can do this, and it's yours for the taking. Um, yeah.
Yeah. No, I love how you capture that moment. So even though it's in a Nigerian experience, it's still the same as what we express as that feeling, the mana, right? There's
Hmm.
moments when you feel that you're overwhelmed, and you can feel that,
Oh
feel the
yeah.
strength of it. So yeah, it's great to hear that you felt it, on your Nigerian side as well.
Oh yeah. So Nigerian culture is just like Samoan, just like Fa Samoan, man. They got lava lavas on. They call them something different. I walk in there, I got my ear lava lava on. Mine's might say Samoan on it, but theirs might have something else on it. But I'm walking in the same way, and it's so funny because I went and I looked, right. The villages. I went and did a little comparison, right, of what it's like. They burying people on top of the ground, right? And
Oh,
and bi- in
wow.
the same style in front of the house, just
Wow.
like Samoa, right? The role of family and culture, the matriarch, the father being, the same roles. So I went to the village, like I'm going like Color Purple style. If you ever see the movie Color Purple, I'm going
Mhm.
to
Yes.
the village. I like, you know, let's go. I don't care
Yeah.
what we see. And so when we went there, they have a meeting house, just like Samoa. They meet there first before you can even get to the village. They meet there, and the chiefs come out. They do a ceremony. They drink. They have a ceremonial piece that they do. It's called a cola nut. And they do it. Only the men can touch. But partaking of this now, knowing that this, like the man said, coming to America, this man really royalty. Like this, like that was like I'm really sitting here now, really appreciating this moment. I got to meet my dad's brothers, his sisters.
Wow.
They're pinching my face and crying. You know, my little sister got married in Nigeria, so I was able to. She was in a traditional Nigerian wedding, and I was able to be in a traditional outfit and be there for her.
Wow.
So many things have opened up because I didn't give up, right? Um, and I'm so grateful. I can't wait to go back again, right? In fact, we're getting ready to do a Samoan Nigerian connection. So we got people from our Samoan side that want to come out and go to Nigeria, and hang out and do their thing. So we're gonna make that happen, you know.
And have the experience of being able to put together Samoan and Nigerian culture together. That's
That
beautiful.
and hopefully find them some wives, some husbands and some wives. You know what I'm saying? We're gonna just get this
Right.
thing.
I have some comments here for you.
Absolutely.
That's such an amazing story, and yet you're on a journey in searching your roots in who you are. In many ways, you are bridging the gap. You remind me a lot of my brother Arlington and his journey.
Yes.
And
I,
then
I love
awesome
Arlington's story.
spirit experience. Wow. Awesome spiritual experience. Wow. That's from Janet. Um, And then
Yeah.
we are ending our podcast, and I wish we could continue because I mean we could go on for hours. And I just want everyone to know that we've only scratched the surface of Uchenna, and there's so much that we would love to have you share with us. But he's coming out with a book soon.
Yes,
Right? Is
ma'am.
that correct, Uchenna? And
Yes, ma'am.
I'm so excited for when that book comes out, and for everybody out there. Again, check out Afatasi brand. He's got an amazing brand out there. Look it up and purchase some of the items. It's support a brother and also look him up. He's got so much amazing things that he's doing for our community, for our people, and you'll love him as much as we all do. So also wanted to mention that there's another comment. Happy Father's Day. I think I've said this, but I'm going to say it again. Happy Father's Day to you both. God bless you too.
Thank you.
Um,
Yeah, happy Father's
Also,
Day.
Happy
yeah,
Father's
yeah.
Day. Yeah. Happy Father's
Arlington,
Day to all the men
go
out
ahead.
there. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Just want to give them
Arlington, go
everybody.
ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah, like Leah said, appreciate everything you shared. A lot of it,
Yeah.
our paths mirror a lot. So I've enjoyed. Sorry, didn't ask a lot of questions because I was absorbing a lot and just soaking in how amazing all like the parallel paths and the names that you mentioned. So I'll just keep it short. You mentioned Jeremiah, his son Jeff lives here in Oklahoma. So
Hmm.
just you probably remember Jeff as a little kid, but he's here in Oklahoma with us.
Jeff. Let me tell you something. So Jeff was one of the people in the families that took me under his wing. Jeff had his mom,
Oh,
his sisters. Jeff's mom had three sisters that were all in Germany at the same time. And they were in dance groups, right? And so Jeff, that was one of my, like, we used to kick it. He was a high school, so he went to Nuremberg High School. And you can tell Jeff you met me. Jeff gonna go, oh my goodness, you met one of the twins, or which one? He's gonna say, which one did you meet? But so yeah, me and Jeff, when I was in high school, we were rivals. High schools, he was a cracking people on the football field, and he was a basketball player. People, as big as he was moving, and he could dunk. But I owe a lot to him. He was very instrumental in keeping me on the right path, and expressing a culture and family. More than anything. Um, Andy Forscreen is another person that I didn't mention. Andy Forscreen, if you're listening, I love you, brother. Happy Father's Day to you as well. Andy Forscreen was one guy that just changed me. He was the most kindest person. Nalu Sateli as well. Some of the most kindest people that just um, really opened their arms, opened their homes. Taukea Panapa, um, so many people that that I hope and I know that I'm making you proud, but I hope that if you're listening and this message gets out to you, that you know that I'm still living what you told me to do, and it's not easy, but somebody got to do it, and it ain't always gonna be fair, but it will be equal.
I gotta mention this one comment. It says, "Oi, cousin Jeff, I was curious when you mentioned the Uremia family."
Oh yeah, Jeff Jeremiah. Yeah, those were good days. I mean, one of the first Samoans that I met, and this is how I'm gonna end it. One of the first Samoans that I had met when we got to Germany um, was a man by the name of Tolu Nua, and Tolu Nua was in a wheelchair. Right, his wife was German. They lived there. He had been there for a while, um, but he took me in. I remember going to a lot of events, and he would just uplifting spirit. And I remember when I got older, there was a book that had, like, some Samoans around the world, right? And he was one of
Okay.
those people in the book. And he was somebody that not only did he know my mother, which was crazy. He knew my mother, um, you know, just just happened to know her before I met him because of my mom's job and all that. So they were acquainted. And I remember saying, "Hey, totally, you know my mother?" He's like, "Man, my mother's name is Thea." So they're like, "Oh, I know Thea. Everybody knows her, And so, um, but it was because, like I said, have I had a father, but when you're in the military, they're gone a lot. So the community is there and they raise you. And so those are people that have I just want to give love and pour out some genuine thanks to, because you know um yeah, they, I wouldn't be standing and have, this testimony, if you will, of what I've been
Yeah.
through.
Well, we appreciate you, Uchenna, and appreciate your testimony, your journey, and all that you've experienced to share with all of us, especially our Polynesian community and the Nigerian community out there, and especially being Tongan at the same time.
Mhm.
Stop.
Love
We're
it.
gonna find a full percentage. I'm gonna post it up as soon as. I don't believe in doing the DNA test, because I just, but because I'm gonna find it through knowledge, right? And I think that
Yeah.
that is, but eventually yeah,
Well,
you're gonna
keep us
see me come up
posted
and
on
put some
it.
T's up.
Yeah. Nice. Well, we appreciate it. And again, we love you. Thank you so much.
Love you
And
too.
please thank your wife and your kids for allowing you to take that opportunity, the time, because you are so busy and the time that you take away from your family is very valuable. So please tell them we said thank you so much. And we love you all of you who are out there viewing. Please take again, look up Uchina and also look up the Afatasi brand. Again, happy Father's Day to you too. Happy Father's Day to everyone else, and make sure you eat a lot. Go not eat tomorrow.
Right. Save
All
some
right.
for dessert.
Yes. Have a good night. You guys all take care, and to God be all the glory. All right. We'll talk to you guys later.
So far, so
All right.
far.
All
Fast way forward.
right.